Welcome to NICTITATING Presents, a genre author series. My guest today is Jonathan Raab. How you doing?
I'm hanging in there, Sean, recovering from, I don't know, flu or something. It's not COVID confirmed, but when you have a little goblin in daycare like myself, you tend to get sick pretty frequently and pretty easily. So I'm feeling much better now.
Well, that's good to hear. So you're going to be having, is it a novella or a novelette?
So those terms kind of drive me crazy when people get
Short novel?
nitpicking.
You're having a short
Yeah,
novel come out.
yeah, I guess I've been calling it a novelette. Just it's about I think like 75 pages total. So I think it's like a little over 10,000 words or so, 10 to 15,000 words.
Yeah, I
So
think technically a novelette, but let's just say short.
yeah,
Excuse me. Let's just say a short novel
okay.
called The Crypt of Blood, a
hmm
Halloween TV special,
hmm
and you're putting that out through your press, Muzzleland Press.
Yeah, so I haven't self-published a book in quite a few years. The last one I did was called The Lesser Swamp Gods of Little Dixie, which is sort of like a fun, sort of gothic, Southern Gothic occult detective story with conspiracy theory, elements. And when this COVID-19 was going on, I was working on this story, and I was like, this is a story that is probably completely unmarketable, and it's too long to be a short story and too short to be a novel. I said, so why don't I just give myself a little project to work on over the summer here and get it ready for Halloween? And I said, I'll just throw this together and put it underneath the Muzzleland Press banner. And I think it's turned out pretty well. I'm pretty excited for people to start reading it.
Well, I have read it, and actually not just because I'm doing the show, I edited.
That's right. Yes, you did a great job. And if folks need an editor, Sean does good work, and he comes cheap.
I
Wait,
do.
we should probably
It's
cut
funny
that
you
part out.
say that because I was like, wow, I made a whole $50 to me. I'm like, that's a lot. But yes, no, it's a good, I can vouch for it. It's good. Well, I guess right off the bat, it's very metafictional. I don't know how often you do that, but I'm a big fan of metafiction. And did you start the project kind of with the idea of like it's going to be this sort of experimental metafictional type of thing, or did you just start like I want to write about kind of a low budget horror movie and go from there?
Yes, all of the above. And so I love found footage as a subgenre. Um, even and especially sometimes the bad stuff. And I also really love gothic horror, right? So like the Hammer stuff, the Universal period, Vincent Price movies with Roger Corman. Bram Stoker's Dracula is a horror movie I saw when I was younger. Probably a little too young in the early to mid '90s. And I just love gothic horror and found footage. And I was thinking of a way, how can I sort of combine these things? And I've been writing sort of semi-meta, metatextual, metafictional horror for a little while. Whether it's my second novel, The Hillbilly Moonshine Massacre, features a radio show host who ends up having like a public access television show where he hunts the supernatural. My most recent novel, Camp Ghoul Mountain Part 6, the official novelization, is a novelization of a slasher movie that doesn't actually exist, complete with footnotes, historical background, a biography of the
Character named Sean that you brutally murdered.
That's right. You volunteered for that. I
I
would
did
remind you.
volunteer for that. I was
Yeah.
very excited because I
Yep.
really got it.
Yeah. I was like, okay, I got to do something special for Sean. So, yeah. So I've been working in this sort of metafictional space for a little while, and I've been obsessed with gothic horror a lot. In the last few years, I was sort of a late convert to the Hammer horror stuff. I found the horror of Dracula like a DVD in the some secondhand store, and I bought it, and I just loved it. And I've really gotten into the gothic horror, the sort of the neo-gothic movement of the mid to late 20th century, where they sort of revisited a lot of the tropes and settings and ideas of the Universal period, a few decades prior. And I just had these ideas sort of swirling around in my head. And a friend of mine, Colin Scharf, he's actually helped co-edit some Muzzleland anthologies, and his fictions appeared in a couple of the early works. We used to make like backyard monster movies together. and we've been talking about making another horror movie together for a few years. And I actually wrote a script called The Crypt of Blood. And it was more or less like, okay, if I've got a week to make a movie and we only have like one location, maybe two, how do I pack all these ideas into it? And I said, well, if we can get access to like a community theater or like a local public access television station with a sound stage, we could just build sets, like rickety cheap sets, and we could just have the graveyard and the crypt and the forest, and we could sort of let the low budget and let the audience imagination sort of fill in the blanks. So I wrote that script, and unfortunately, obviously we haven't been able to get together, and obviously this year we couldn't get together because of a world-ending catastrophe and plague.
Right.
Hoping I'm not getting your podcast demonetized by mentioning this stuff here.
That's fine. I don't make any money.
Yeah, I'm just being generous. Yeah. So and I was like, well, I've got this script and we can't make this movie. I said, why don't I just, like I said, I just, decided to make a little project for myself. And I said, well, I'll write this into a short story and try to sell it. And I kind of sprawled a little bit longer than your average short story. And, I ended up with the book, and I was like, well, I'll just put this out in time for Halloween. It'll be kind of a fun treat for folks like me who like the meta horror and like found footage and like gothic horror. It's sort of all those things together.
Yeah, I mean, I'm also one of those people. So I had a lot of fun with it. It works on multiple levels. What I wasn't expecting actually going into it was that, there's the fun stuff and the kind of spooky stuff, but there are times when it gets really heavy, which I was not expecting, and I was, pleasantly surprised with it, because it's like there's vampires and there's ghouls and all that type of stuff. And then, there's, I won't say what it is, but there's certain moments where you're like, oh, okay, this is very heavy.
Yeah. And that usually is kind of a running theme in my work, is like, I like to write really entertaining, pulpy stuff that's going to keep you turning the page, because I come from a working class background, and I like a book that doesn't waste my time. And that's not to say I don't enjoy challenging literature or nonfiction or whatever, because I do. But typically, my ideal reader is someone who's coming home from work, they're a little tired, and they just want something fun, and they want something entertaining, and they want something to scare them a little bit, because that's kind of fun. So I set out to write that. And then within that, I try to incorporate a message, typically concerning whatever sort of idiosyncratic thing that's like bothering me lately, right? So I'm sort of rewriting this, turning this into a novelette in the context of the full-on breakdown of the American Empire, which has sort of been a slow motion reeling disaster going on for the entirety of my life. And our present circumstances have sort of magnified that. And this is not a book about a plague or anything like that. You don't have to worry. This very much is escapist, but I will say that the elements of what it means to be an American in the 21st century, what it means to live in this country, and the responsibility, the guilt, and the horrors attendant with being someone who is paying attention in this era of history, feeds into that. Now, if that doesn't appeal to you, if that sounds like pretentious and awful, don't worry. There's plenty of like ghoulish fun, and you can kind of get through those scenes. I try not to be too heavy-handed.
No, it was very subtle. It was with a deft touch, but I just enjoyed how you incorporated it. Part of it was through, and I won't say too much because I don't want to spoil it, but it was through commercial segments.
Right.
And it sort of worked organically, because you're like, oh, it's a fun, and then you're like, oh, okay, and this is happening also.
Yeah. Let me assure you, if anything I just said offends you, you can just skip past most of it pretty quickly. It's kind of a blink if you miss it type of thing. That being said, I know plenty of writers who use subtext, and they're all cowards. To quote Garth Marenghi. And that stuff was just floating around in the back of my head, because the older I get, when I was younger, it's like, well, my politics used to be different, and the way I looked at things was different. It's like, well, I don't necessarily appreciate when people put politics into their art. As I've gotten older, I've realized sort of that's a ridiculous statement, because, trying to be neutral is sort of a form of conservatism. And I don't mean that in necessarily the Republican sense. What I mean is like, if you're trying to act neutral or unobservant or not remark upon, the ill state of the world, in whatever context that may be, you're sort of being dishonest, right? And
Well, not only that, I think some people don't realize it, but by not incorporating politics, that's a political statement. So no
yeah,
matter what you
correct.
do, you're being political. Even by trying not to be political, you are actively saying, I don't want to incorporate my politics necessarily into the art. But I mean, then we get into how just morals and kind of life experience are also politics.
Yeah, your life is shaped by it. Politics are interested in you, even if you're not interested in it. So,
I mean, I get it. I'm the same way. In theory, I don't like political horror because if it's done poorly, it can be very draining. It's like
yeah,
anything. If it's
correct.
done poorly, you're just like, oh God, okay. But if
Yeah.
it's done right, I think I can enjoy it.
Yeah, and what content, and we've been talking about it for a while, and I don't want to oversell or overemphasize those points, but like,
No, it's really not it's more of a throwback kind of horror found footage type of book.
yeah, and having that sort of content within the context of the commercials, I think I hope organically will work for the readers. So we should probably explain a little bit. When I say this is like a novelette and I talk about found footage and gothic horror, those things don't necessarily go together. But basically, the book works as you're watching a recorded broadcast from Halloween in 2007. Supposedly this is a lost film. You weren't sure it exists, but you've managed to find a copy, or a copy manages to find you. And basically, you're watching a public access television station broadcast of a community theater stage production of the classic vampire novel, The Crypt of Blood. So you're a couple layers deep into there. So when the commercials pop up, it's sort of a natural fit. It's like you're watching something that was on television at one time.
Yeah, in a weird way. Well, maybe not in a weird way, but it reminded me of Halloween 3.
Mm-hmm.
Just in terms of, the fact that there's ads that are like not just in the background, like that you can actually see.
Yeah. That's part of the sort of metatextual, conceit behind the whole piece, is that like this thing is a whole, but it has a narrative that is broken up across scenes, and the commercial breaks and the interstitials, I'll sort of just leave it at that, all feed into each other. So this is sort of a coherent whole that wouldn't work without the different component parts as disparate as they first appear.
Yeah, and I mean, I do like that. I don't want to spend the entire time talking about Crypt of Blood, though. You do have a short story collection that's, tell us a little bit about that. I don't know when that's coming out, and I don't know if you can say yet, but...
Yeah, so The Crypt of Blood is my sort of big release personally this year, aside from any short fiction that I've had come out or coming out. I do have things here and there. Next year, probably early, maybe the first quarter, maybe second quarter, I will have my first short story collection. It's probably about 5-6 years in the making. It's called The Secret Goatman Spook Show and Other Psychological Warfare Operations. So that'll be collected short fiction. I want to say most of them have appeared. Most of the stories have appeared in various anthologies or magazines, and then I've got like about 4 or 5 new ones in there as well, plus a bunch of flash fiction that I worked on just kind of over the years. So that'll be coming out from probably Turn to Ash, which is the company run by Ben Holzapfel, who published Camp Ghoul Mountain Part 6. He and I seem to be operating on the same wavelength. I like him as an editor quite a bit. He does good layout work. He puts together a good book. We kind of operate on the same frequency. So that should be coming out probably the first quarter, maybe second quarter of next year. But I'll be shilling that pretty relentlessly leading up to convention season, assuming we're going to have a convention season next year. If there's a vaccine in time, but we'll see.
Right. That's a big if. But that's exciting. So you got a lot of stuff going on. I guess I'd like to pull it back and ask some more general questions at this point.
Sure.
Well, when did you, if you remember exactly, when did you start writing, actively seeking publication?
I started writing in elementary school, but actively seeking real publication probably, I think, in college, which is probably right around the time I start, like early college. I started getting back into reading horror fiction, started getting into Lovecraft. I came to him pretty late. I was sending out like query letters to agents, like written out, getting addresses from the writer's market book from the school library type of thing, right? Like I just wrote probably 4 or 5 novel length, full length books over the course of, I don't know, 6 or 7 years, starting probably when I was 18, moving into my mid 20s. I was in the military for a while and I started writing like veteran advocacy stuff. And that kind of shifted my focus for a little bit because I was writing nonfiction. I was doing like, I had articles appearing in like military publications and civilian publications. And then I was like, I don't actually want to do this anymore. I want to go back to horror fiction. So I probably got really back into that in my late 20s. And I think probably the big turning point for me was when I started Muzzleland Press, I think in 2015. Again, with my friend Colin, we were like, hey, let's put together a horror anthology. And we just started putting together books, and I put out like one a year, or one every year and a half or so. And my short fiction probably started taking off with the publication of The Secret Goatman Spook Show with the Lovecraft e-zine, which you can still find that story online there. And that's the story from which the upcoming book takes its title, because it also sort of serves as sort of a central theming piece that might explain how all of these sort of like different stories came to be and came to be together. So I think that was probably back in 2015 or 2016 when that story came out. So since then I've been focused between the editing work, working on putting out other authors like novellas or novels, or short story collections, and putting together anthologies. And probably in the last 2 years, I decided to really buckle down. I was like, hey, I'm just going to write a ton of short fiction. Put out the novel Camp Cool Mountain Part 6, and now I'm trying to keep busy, with this project, Crypt of Blood, and with the collection coming out next year. And I think probably once that's done, I'll probably shift focus and start working on my next novel. We'll see how that goes.
Yeah, I mean, you had a lot going on.
I try to write like I'm running out of time.
I mean, I appreciate that. People tell me all the time, you're prolific, and I don't know, maybe it just speaks to how I am as a person. I always deny it because in my head, I'm like, I could have done more.
Yeah. There is always that, and there is always that trying to strike a balance between having a life,
right? But that's the thing.
Pursuing...
It's always I could have done more if I was completely alone and like homeless or whatever.
Yeah, no, just a shut in. It's hard to thread that needle, because if you're a writer, you have a creative urge and you want to put out work, you want to tell stories, you want to get it in front of people. But on the other hand, unless you're a handful of people, you're not going to make a lot of money doing this.
No.
So it's sort of hard to justify sometimes, not to just strip it down to this like capitalist sort of equation.
No, but I mean, realistically, you need money to survive, and
yes, correct,
I would say maybe 10% of people make enough money from writing fiction that they can actually do it, and that's all they have to do. Yeah,
and that number is much lower if it's horror fiction. If you're cursed,
right, and even those people, it's not always consistent.
Right, yeah, exactly. So I focus. I'm pretty disciplined when it comes to writing. Like I wake up at 4:30 in the morning. I'll exercise, I'll eat breakfast, a quick breakfast, and I'll try to write. And normally I'm getting 15 minutes in before the kid wakes up, and then he's up, and then depending on what my wife is doing, maybe I can get another 15, 20 minutes in. Maybe I got to take him to daycare. And then on the weekends, she's usually pretty supportive about giving me Saturday and Sunday about an hour a day or so to write, but that's usually also broken up with, diaper changes, or he wants to check in with daddy or whatever. And of course I'm going to stop to do that, because that's, that's more important.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's a challenge, but it's, if you can keep yourself disciplined, if you set a schedule and you stick to it and you do it even when you don't want to do it, you'll all of a sudden, those days where you only write 200 words, well, they add up after a while.
They do. Yeah. I mean,
at the end of the year, you've got a good catalog.
I've talked to plenty of people that have never written a novel, and you want to be encouraging, but they're always like, I don't understand. And it's kind of just like, you just do it. Like, there's nothing to understand. Like, you do it, and your first one might be terrible, so you write another one. Or you do it, and you release it, and you might sell 10 copies, and then you just keep going. Like, but like, yeah. It's always like there's that, people want the quick out. They want the secret, like, well, tell me what the real secret is to writing a novel. And it's like, I guess my version would just be it's a lot. There's a lot of words, so figure out your way to compartmentalize it and like break it up. Maybe not necessarily do a certain word count every day or every week, but like figure out your in and how you can block it out. Because like a lot of the people that ask me about novels have written short stories up to 5,000 words, 10,000 words. So it's like, all right, we'll just do that and just keep doing that, but about one thing.
Yeah, and I find that can be more challenging sometimes. And telling a complete story with a beginning, middle, and end, or if you're not using that format, something that's compelling, that's coherent and sort of makes sense, or and moves somebody. Accomplishing all that in 5,000 words is quite the lift. It's quite the accomplishment. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's funny too because I've heard and read plenty of people that there's this turning point where they, people that start as short story writers, they think, oh, and I'm sort of at this point still. They think, oh, a short story is so much easier. And then a novel is so hard because you have all that word length and you got to figure out how to expand the plot. But then there comes a turning point where you've written enough novels and then it becomes, well, novels are easy because I can sort of space it out and I don't have to do this laser focused thing. But then the short stories become harder to do because it's like I have to have this really concise version of this story.
Yeah. It's like, oh, I can't spend 500 words describing the mountains anymore. Crap. I need to figure out how to move the plot forward here, in about a tenth of the space that I'm used to.
And that's why right now I consider myself a novellayist, because that is the length that that I'm comfortable with right now. Like I can do like 15,000 words fairly easily. It's just anything past that.
Yeah, and as a reader, I like sort of short books, mostly because I like the endorphin rush I get when I finish a book. Because I was programmed by Pizza Hut's Book It program. You finish a book, you get a sticker, and you get enough stickers, you get a pizza.
Yeah,
I think I still got that Pavlovian response going on in me. So I like short books.
I like them because I can't write big books. Yes.
Yeah. Yes. So I like short books too. It's a much easier investment. It's like, well, you look at this thing, oh, it's not too thick. I can probably read this in a couple weeks rather than, a giant doorstop. It's like, what if this sucks? What if I get halfway into it and I don't want to finish it? So
yeah, no, that's true. So you had mentioned you've written a script before. How many scripts have you written?
I would guess probably 5 or 6. Like I said, my buddy and I used to make these like terrible movies like throughout.
So they were like short film scripts, or they were feature length?
There was like 1 or 2 that were kind of full length or approaching full length. When I say making movies or films, it was like literally growing up in the middle of nowhere. No one around us understood film theory or had equipment aside from like video, like straight up home video cameras. So it was like entirely self-taught, trying to edit on computers that would crash out if your timeline got too big.
Oh yeah, I remember.
You know what I mean? Like just real awful. We had a lot of fun, and I have a lot of good memories of making those movies, and so do like a lot of our friends. But I don't consider myself a filmmaker in any serious sense.
I mean, same. I made a couple in college, but yeah. I would not want to go back and watch them.
Yeah, some of them are pretty cringe. In fact, people are like, oh, you got that one? It's like, actually, it's got a bunch of humor in it that I don't find myself comfortable with anymore. So I took that off the internet. Like, I don't want people to watch that.
Oh, yeah. I mean, sort of a weird aside, but I used to have one that was just a song I made up about how much I liked pills that was on YouTube.
Yeah.
Very quickly, the last couple of years, I was like, just take that one down.
Yeah, you grow up and you're like, oh yeah, like that humor was based around making other people who were different than me feel bad. Like that's not good. You know what I mean? Like
yeah, mine was like it was literally showing my pill bottles and shit. Like, yeah, no, maybe I shouldn't do that.
Yeah, that's not funny. Yeah, that's not funny. So but
it was a little funny. I just don't want to. I mean, your end. Yeah, it sounded like it was more. Yeah. But anyway,
you grow up, you live and you learn. No, I would jump at the chance to make another one if I could in like a serious, meaningful way. And I've entertained the idea and we've talked about it, but life kind of keeps getting in the way, unfortunately. So.
Yeah, I mean, it's very challenging, I mean, it's funny because I recently wrote another script and I've been kind of getting back into that side of it and sent it to a few people and they've been talking with me like, oh, like, well, is it hard and this and that? And I have to like tell people I started as a screenwriter. Like I didn't start as a prose writer. First things I wrote were 60-page script and then a 90-page script and So like I'm much more comfortable in the screenwriting format. And if anything, prose was what I had to spend the last 10 years actually. I still don't know how to do it, but getting better with it.
Yeah, I suppose there's probably an advantage of working in a different form because you can think of things differently, and I occasionally, and I don't wade into this shit at all, but like being on social media and being connected to other writers, you'll see debates about, whatever the topic du jour is that week. And occasionally stuff will come up about, prose that's cinematic or, movies that are trying to be novels or vice versa. I'm always writing with a sense that I want this to be a movie someday because that would be awesome. And I find that trying to translate the pacing, imagery, or sense of watching a film strengthens my writing in a very like meaningful way. Like I'm basically like, what if John Carpenter directed this in the 1980s, right? Like because I'm pretty basic. And I think that's good, and I think
Yeah.
Writing from a standpoint where you have to communicate a lot through dialogue and subtle action notes in a screenplay probably helps make your writing pretty lean, which it is. Having read your stuff's usually pretty.
Yeah, if anything, my issue is I'm so lean that I'll be like, let me write this novel, and then I'll finish at 30,000 words and be like, God damn it, it's not even novel length. But yeah, no, I mean, I won't make this all about me. I know that's obnoxious. Yeah, I can't help it in terms of cinematic. Like, I'm not trying most of the time. It's just that's how I think. When I'm writing, I'm seeing it in my head, and I'm just like such a big film fan and visual medium fan that like I'm basically watching the movie in my head and then sort of transcribing it the best I can and maybe trying to elongate it a little bit so it's more of an actual novel. But like there's always a little movie in my head.
Yeah, and that's I've learned to just go ahead and embrace whatever it is that I want to write about and however I want to do it. And in so doing that, I mean, I'm sure my skill has increased as well, but like the more I've leaned into my own taste, the more successful I've been in terms of selling stories and selling books and trying to cultivate an audience. So, just lean into it and don't worry about what other people want. Like this novelette, The Crypt of Blood is easily the weirdest thing I've ever written.
Oh yeah, I can confirm.
Yeah. But at the same time, when you were editing it, you sent me some notes. And you're like, "This is the most you thing you've ever written," and you meant that as a compliment. At least I hope you did. And that's sort of how I feel about it. It's like, well, I wanted to make this movie, but I can't. It's like, well, how can I translate that to the page and still make it effective? It's like, I'm just going to write this like you're watching a videotape recording of a televised broadcast from 2007, Halloween 2007. Like that's just that's what I want to do.
Yeah, and I think you're right. I think it does work because there is that strength because you can tell that you really love what you're writing about, but you're also, I can't even pinpoint it, but sometimes, when people are writing about something that they care about or the style they like, you can tell that it works better than if they're maybe trying something else. I can only speak to myself, but
yeah.
I know a couple of years ago, it was more in vogue to do like, Lovecraftian style stories. So I was trying to write those. Like, I have not sold a single one, Like, I got shortlisted by Scott R. Jones, I think 3 times. So close. But, like, I never had much success with it. And then finally I was just like, screw it. I'm not good at this. I'm going to write how I like to write. And, like, pretty soon I was like, oh, okay, and now I'm selling. Like, I leaned into the media stuff, and then Blind Opera came out, and people really loved it. So I was like, oh, well, I'm an idiot. I should have just been doing what I like to do all along.
Exactly. Just lean into whatever it is you want to do, and I think that energy people will pick up on. If you're having fun writing it, it's not always fun. It's not always gonna be fun. But like if you're having fun, if you're looking forward to writing it, if you find yourself thinking about it when you're not writing, like that's a good sign, and you should embrace that. You should do more of that. And I posted something on Twitter, sort of like a half joke a couple of weeks ago, but it's like, I used to get concerned about like originality and like trying to come up with new ideas. And I do obviously, but like I sort of realized I'm just iterating on the same themes and ideas and stories kind of over and over again. Like they all appear differently, right? But like a lot of them have overlap and themes that I'm not even consciously necessarily trying to pursue. But like I just was like, oh, I kind of want to do that again. But what if it's a little bit different? What if I come at it from this angle? You know what I mean? And that's that's sort of where this project sort of came from. I feel like it's my kind of a thesis statement on the stuff I've been working on for the past couple of years.
Yeah, no, I would say so. But it is interesting how that works because, I mean, I've written stuff that like I wrote it and I was happy at the time, but I can tell later on, people are sort of like, I'd love if you wrote something like that again. And career-wise, it would make much more sense to do that. But I just don't have it. I don't have it. You know what I mean? Like I wrote a Bizarro thing. People clearly love that. I should have just stuck with Bizarro, but I was like, I don't want to do that.
Yeah, that's okay. That's okay. Like I said, there was a point in my writing career, and I use that in the most loose, self-denigrating terms possible. My writing career, where I was like, okay, I am getting publication credits consistently in the nonfiction world. Do I want to keep doing this? I'm like, God, no, I don't want to do this anymore. Like, I'm exhausted. I don't feel like I have anything more to say. My feelings on the subject are changing radically. I don't want to do this. I want to go back to writing horror because that's sort of been my first love for a long time, as a writer and my first love as a writer and as a reader. And I just remember thinking back to one of my college instructors. It was one of the English instructor. He was a writer. He had some books out through some small presses and, did conventions and stuff like that. He wrote basically like young adult literature and, had some mild success with that. And he was like, well, what do you want to write? And I said, well, I think I really want to write horror. And he said, that's okay. He's like, just understand that you're consigning yourself to the literary ghetto. He's like, if you're okay with that, go for it. He's like, don't set yourself on having big expectations about Stephen King money or anything like that. And he said, you'll be fine as long as you're not thinking like you're going to make it like that. He's like, you might. He's like, but you probably won't. He's like, if you're okay with that, go for it. And I just sort of made that decision. I was like, well, this is what I want to write. This is the type of author I want to be. And then, being fully immersed and embracing that part of myself in the field has allowed me to further, drill down and specialize and say, well, I want to write meta horror, found footage, gothic horror fiction right now. Like I've written several stories in that vein, including this one. That's what I want to write now, no matter how weird it is, and how unmarketable I might think it is initially. I just want to do this. And it's actually kind of worked out because I, sell a few short stories every year, and it's kind of nice.
Yeah, I mean, I can't imagine. Must be nice to get the money, but I can't imagine a worse fate than like if you love to write, but like you just happen to write something you don't give a crap about, and it just does amazing, and you make all this money, and suddenly you're staring down the barrel of like, okay, well, I could continue to have a life and a career if I spend hundreds of thousands of hours writing this thing I hate. That's got to be like a fresh hell, and then you got to pretend like you like it, like, oh, I love it,
Well, frankly, I find the idea of someone making a living as a writer just to be a fantastical idea. I think you should turn that into a book.
No, it's fictional. I mean, even like Paul Tremblay has a day job. So
yeah, no, he's like a math teacher, right?
Yeah, he's like a math teacher. Full time. Well, he might be part time now. I don't know, but I'm assuming.
I think Adam Caesar's a teacher as well. He's got a big novel coming out. It's like in Target.
Yeah.
Clown in a Cornfield looks like a fun book, and I think he's a teacher
right.
too.
I didn't even realize he was a teacher, but yeah.
I think so. Guidance counselor or something like that. Anyway, yeah, but that type of thing does seriously happen. I actually write quite a bit for my day job, and I am not writing horror fiction. Occasionally I can squeeze in sort of an oblique, like, Star Wars reference into what I'm writing when the editor's not paying attention. But, beyond that, I'm not really, writing stuff I'm necessarily passionate about. It's interesting. It's good that I'm writing. I had an editor once, we sold he helped me sell a piece. And I was like, well, I don't want to get paid for this. We can donate the money or whatever. He's like, listen, take the check. He's like, this way you'll be able to tell your grandkids you got paid to write something, because that's going to be very rare going forward. Luckily, that hasn't turned out to be the case, but I think there's some truth in that. So there's plenty of people with day jobs, if you work communications or something like that, or marketing, where you're going to be writing, and you're.
No, honestly, if somebody asked me right now, like, what is the best advice you have for somebody who wants to, make money from writing and be a writer, I'd be like, make sure you have like a steady stream of income from just some other type of job, because it's not just the money. It's like, I remember being unemployed, and there's so much stress because you're like, well, if I write this, then in theory I can make money at it. But it's very rarely a thing where you can, like, I wrote it, it took a month, I sold it in a month, and then I have the check. Like, it's much more like I sold it, and then it comes out a year later, and when I don't need the money, I get $500.
Yep. And I do accounting every month for Muzzleline Press, and I tally up the royalties that let's say somebody's novel that I publish comes out, and it's like, okay, well, he made $2 in royalties this month. Do I send him the PayPal notification
Yeah.
for $2? It's like, now I'm going to wait 6 months to make sure. Okay, he's got $20. I'll send him $20 now or something like that. You know what I mean? Like, it being on the other side of it, being both a writer and an editor running a very small micro press, like you're not going to make enough money to pay the bills. Occasionally you're going to have a good stretch where you're going to get paid for a couple things that came in, and that's really nice. It's like, it's wonderful to be able to buy my wife dinner or something, because like, hey, I got paid 3 times this quarter for writing. Awesome. But it's probably going to be 6 months before that happens again, unfortunately. So.
No, yeah, like the other day, I was like, oh man, I got the Bartlett tribute, and then I realized, like, and it's not out for a year.
Yeah,
okay.
yeah, still, yeah. I got to go through a Kickstarter and printing, yeah, and all that stuff. So
Yeah, I mean, they already, got funded for it, but you know what I mean. It's like, it's so, yeah, it's even the big ones. It's like, it takes a while.
yeah, it does. And there was a couple months ago, there was a bunch of real writers, like blue check marks, talking about how much they got paid for their novels.
Oh, I mean, I was not a huge fan of that.
Well, I thought it was interesting.
I liked it in that it was interesting, but I don't know, part of me was like, show off.
Well, yes and no, because there were a couple folks that were like, I got paid $4,000. And I'm like, oh, like.
Oh, and they were like bigger people?
Yeah, and I'm like, I thought,
right.
Oh.
So I saw one person in particular who was like, I made 40,000 advance on this, 40,000 on this, and I was like, okay,
oh, I did
calm down.
That. No, I saw several bigger names that I've seen books that got coverage in major newspapers and television and radio or whatever, and I'm like, oh, they didn't make that much money. So I think that's sort of a good gut check as well, is just to like, okay, even people you consider a level above you or a couple levels above you, just kind of keep in mind that yeah, that's not insignificant. $4,000 is a lot of money to me, but at the same time, that's not a lot of money compared to what a writer might have been making mid-century, last century.
No, I mean, if you want to put it in perspective, like, you could work the worst retail job for the lowest amount of money and only do it part-time, and you would still make more, probably in 2 months, than you'd make on writing in like 5 years.
Yeah. So it's just kind of keep in mind. So it does come back to the sort of the passion thing, of course. So
yeah, but I mean, like, it is a thing. If you love doing it, then it's like the money's almost just a bonus. Obviously, everybody wants more of a bonus, but
yeah.
So. So we're hitting, I think, about the 45-minute mark. I've sort of written myself into a corner with this, but I'd like to do some random ass questions because I've just started this, and now I have to stick to it, I guess. And then there's the time that podcasters hate, where there has to be dead air. Let's see here. Okay, if you could write any other genre other than horror, not counting nonfiction, what do you think you'd write?
Probably science fiction, like space opera.
Okay, I could see that.
Yeah, that'd be a lot of fun. In fact, I used to write that stuff when I was younger. Like, I do not have highbrow taste. Like, I am a Star Trek and Star Wars fanatic. Like, I love that stuff. If those companies approached me and were like, we're gonna pay you nothing. Like, we're gonna pay you in fast food or whatever to write a novel in a space opera novel, Star Wars or Star Trek or something like that, I would do it in a heartbeat, absolutely. So I'd say probably science.
Oh, same. If somebody like Remedy Games came to me and was like, can you write a control novel? I'd be like, can I ever?
Yeah, absolutely. Like, there's plenty of video game franchises that I think would be, sort of ripe for, especially nowadays where narrative is so much more important.
I know. It'd be a little scary, though. There's so much to learn. Like, if somebody was like, write a Doom novel.
Oh God, I would. Oh my
God! Like, there's so much.
There are Doom novels. I actually have the first one, but they're very weird. I think they gave it. I think it's by 1 or 2 writers, but their names escape me at the moment. But they basically started out by adapting the games and then just went into sort of semi-high concept, weird extra dimensional stuff.
Okay, it seems like a weird,
which is kind of what they do with the new video games anyway. So I guess they were onto something. But I would write a Doom novel. I'd write a kick-ass Doom novel. It'd be scary and action packed. So get at me, Microsoft, since you bought everything. So
I know they own everything now. All right. What do you think is the most unique part of where you live? I know you live in the mountains of Colorado. What do you think is the most mountains of Colorado thing that you experience monthly, daily, whatever?
So I live in the Front Range urban corridor. So there's not quite in the mountains, although I can walk to a couple small mountains nearby. The most unique thing, Colorado is sort of a high strange hotspot. So you got like the San Luis Valley is probably the most famous area. It's more towards like the southwest of me. But you've got like spook lights and skinwalkers and brujas. There's also a ton of UFOs. I think it was back in December or January of this year in the before times. There you can actually Google this. If you Google like Boulder, Colorado drone flap, basically from like Boulder to Fort Collins into Wyoming, and I think in some neighboring states, people were seeing drone swarms. Like swarms of,
Oh, that's disturbing.
yeah,
Yes.
like swarms of mechanical flying drones. And it started out with like, well, we don't know who's doing this, but like if you look into it, it's more than just, oh, we saw some unauthorized drones. It's like drones flying out of drones, shining lights into people's houses, just, really weird, baffling stuff that I think the FAA and the like FBI looked into, and they're like, we have no idea who is doing this. We can't figure out where it's coming from. It's a very, very odd subject. So weird stuff like that happens in Colorado pretty frequently. Although I've never seen anything weird or experienced it myself, unfortunately.
Yeah, I mean, I have my own UFO experience, but it's so lame. It was like broad daylight at like 2 p.m. I was driving down the highway outside of Bridgewater, and I just looked over, and it looked like there was a plane, like sort of about to crash.
Yeah.
And I was like, that's odd. And then it sort of like burst into flames.
Huh.
And then, it fell below the tree line or however. I couldn't see it anymore. And I was like waiting to hear an explosion and nothing happened. And then obviously I got home and checked all the news. Like, okay, was there a plane that crashed? Because that would, and nothing.
Weird.
But like even saying it's a plane, I'm like, am I just like retroactively saying it was a plane? Because I couldn't really tell what it.
Yeah.
But as far as UFO stories go, like it's not the best because it's not at night. It's like a crowded highway, and I just couldn't identify what it was.
I mean, that's creepy. I mean, that's what a lot of UFO stuff is. Like it's unexplainable. You don't know what it is. When you say UFO, it tends to conjure this image of like a mechanical aircraft or spacecraft from another planet that's piloted by sentient beings. But typically, even if that's what you think you're seeing, they tend to behave in ways that don't seem to conform to, aerodynamics. It's like when people see Bigfoot, they don't typically just see Bigfoot. They also see UFOs. They see portals. You know what I mean? They see goblins, very weird experiences. You shouldn't write it off just because didn't conform to anything.
No, I didn't write. I mean, we went to in New Hampshire. It was a UFO convention, and I did write it down somewhere. It was like, write your own UFO. And I was like, I know this isn't a good story, and no one will believe me because it just doesn't make sense.
Yeah, I'm just fascinated by the whole topic because I tend to be more like in the John Keel school of thought, where this is not aliens visiting us from another world. It's something to do with the environment interacting with the human mind in a very strange and profound way. And I don't necessarily think we can understand it. So I think it's cool that you saw something like that. I'd love to see something.
Yeah, I mean, what's interesting tay is that I mentioned Bridgewater for a reason because it's around the Bridgewater Triangle. I realized that was where this was, and then I know a little bit about it, but I did a little more research, and they see a lot of like flaming, a lot of orbs and a lot of like flaming spheres.
Yeah,
and I'm like, well, it was flaming.
Yeah, there you go.
So there you go. So swamp gas or experimental aircraft. Who the hell knows?
Old Testament angels. Those boys were on fire half the time. So sure.
I don't think they looked like metal planes, but how the hell would I know?
No, they're more like weird triple-headed, many-eyed creatures from beyond. So
yeah, but I mean, okay, that's cool. So yeah, I think that's probably a good time to go out because if we keep going down the cryptid and UFO thing, this will be another 3 hours.
Yeah, that's going to be another podcast that we'll start here in another 6 months when we're still locked down.
Yeah, when we still don't have a vaccine or anything. Well, okay. I'm going to do my quick spiel. So obviously, Nictitating Books. My first book from Nictitating Books is Screaming Creatures, my first full-length collection. It has the story Blind Opera, which I briefly mentioned earlier, that was featured in Vastarian. Can't remember if it's one or two stories that were in a anthology that you did. I think it was just one, because I have Centralia.
Yes, that was in Terror in 16 Bits.
Yes. So yeah, that is available. In terms of the other books, guys, I couldn't tell you. Still learning about the press running thing and realizing everybody works at their own pace, unfortunately. But yes, we will have new books coming out in the future. And so yeah. John, why don't you do a plug?
Yeah, so if you're interested, if we didn't turn you off from my bizarre, idiosyncratic found footage gothic horror nightmare, you can check out The Crypt of Blood, a Halloween TV special. By the time this airs, it should be available widely in paperback. I'm planning on doing an ebook version as well, if that's your interest. I also got to shout out Black Mountain Transmitter, which is a musician out of Northern Ireland. He did a custom soundtrack for the novelette. So if you like sort of spooky ambient music, definitely check out the soundtrack as well. And my previous novel, Camp Ghoul Mountain Part 6, is available in most online retailers. And you can find pretty much all of my books at muzzlelandpress.com, or you can go to muzzlelandpress.storenb.com to go right to the storefront, and you can pick up a signed copy.
Well, there you go. Thanks for coming on. I know this has been a little bit of finagling, but we finally got you on. And yeah, always a pleasure.
Yeah, I'm just glad I'm not sick anymore.
In the coming weeks, actually, this is the first time that I don't have anyone else lined up. It's sort of liberating. The last 2 months, I've had like a laundry list of people. But I'm sure I'll get other people on. So
yeah, just enjoy it.
That's true. I don't think there's enough outlets for writers for interviews. That's part of why I'm doing this.
Yeah, and I can make some suggestions as well too. Plenty of other weirdos who deserve to get a little signal boost. So I appreciate you doing this. I appreciate you having me on.
All right, yeah. So stay tuned, everybody.